Okay, so we're looking at blue now. First card that jumps out at you, Nick.
Yeah, the Scholar, I'd say Civilized Scholar. Like looters are classically good and limited, and especially so when it's slower formats. And on an open board, this thing seems pretty brutal. Like it goes from getting you card quality to being a huge attacker on an open board. And blue has some powerful cards like Claustrophobia, and between white and blue, you get tap and bounce effects that clear the board for you. So you can go from building your board to bashing for a lot very quickly.
Yep, this card seems just completely insane. Blue does not get a lot of cards that can help them filter and also be huge threats on their own. And so this card is pretty unique and should see a ton of play. And I could even see it drifting over maybe for a little bit of play in Constructed.
There is one card in blue that strikes me, makes me wonder how powerful the ability could be, and that is the Armor Scab. He's just a Horn Turtle for 3 mana, and I like Horn Turtles, but putting in the top 4 cards of your library, how powerful is that going to be for this format?
It could range, depending on your deck, from very powerful to irrelevant. It just really depends on what kind of cards you have and what you're trying to do. Like, if you've got something crazy like Scarab Ruinator, or if you have like a lot of sweet flashback cards, then it could be just huge advantage to you just being able to have more and more options at once.
Even if you have things just like Think Twice in your deck, I mean, Think Twice is, I like that card in general, but just milling that into your graveyard doesn't seem that bad either to have that option later.
I think it's important for blue because I think one of blue's best commons is going to be, outside of the removal, Claustrophobia I think is going to be the best blue common, but then Stitch Drake I think will be second. And that thing's very easy to turn on. It's a 3/4 flyer for 3, and you just have to exile a guy from your yard.
Like, this card's huge. It's really difficult to kill large creatures like that in this format, and it's like the power level of this card's like usually blue has to pay 4 to 5 mana to get that kind of creature, and this guy comes down for 3 with a pretty minor upside or downside. I'm sorry, and like I could see this just being one of the biggest staples of the blue X flyers archetype. Like it's gonna be one of the most important commons in the set.
I mean, in the comment slide, it just doesn't seem like there's any other flyer that compares to it at that speed.
There isn't really. Like white's comparable card is a 2/3 for 3. You don't have the drawback for like the speed of putting it down, but the late game effect is just way different.
That card can go toe to toe with some of the rares in the format, and like it's just a huge body. It's just a huge body. It's one of the biggest bodies you can have in this format, and it's only a common. It's going to be very important.
I mean, but you also have to consider how awkward the hands are where you have 3 lands in this guy and nothing else before then.
Sure, yeah, that's going to impact how you draft, though, and build your sealed deck, because you need the cards like that Horn Turtle guy where you can feed your graveyard, or Civilized Scholar, like we were saying.
Yeah, or even like what I think is the second best blue card in this set, which is Forbidden Alchemy, also feeds that guy. Like this card's top 5 cards in the set, hands down. It's gonna feed your graveyard with all your flashback cards that you're drafting, because blue has some pretty good amount of flashback cards compared to the other colors. It's gonna be a huge force in Constructed, and then it's also gonna feed your cards like your Stitch Drakes and any of your other scab cards that require you to exile cards from your graveyard. And it's basically a tutor. It's Impulse, which is insane. And with flashback, it's gonna be great late in the game too.
So this is one of those cards that ignores what we were talking about earlier about not being good enough on its own without the flashback. If you're not black, you definitely play this card, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. And it's based more around what archetypes it allows. Like blue in general needs, almost all these cards are asking for creatures in your graveyard to work. Like the Stitch Drake, the Goliath, the Makeshift Mauler, they're all asking you to have a creature in your graveyard to work. So something like that's way more powerful and higher drafted because it's required in the whole archetype. The rest of your picks are going to be based on a card like that.
So the card Mind Streaker, is that something that you guys think could end up coming back to bite you, being that there are a lot of cards that rely on the graveyard? Could it help your opponent out ever, or do you see that as you're mainly just going to be hitting yourself with it, or what?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It'll depend on the deck you draft, of course. In general, it seems like blue is going to want to mill itself, but if you're dealing with a deck like white, there's not too many good on-color white flashback cards where milling them is just going to be fine.
Yeah, I feel like there is actually a mill deck to be drafted somewhere in this. There's there's a flashback card that mills 4 at a time. There's that guy, and a couple other cards, and you could very easily see you just drafting a mill deck.
I mean, this guy seems really busted if you're trying to mill your opponent away. I mean, if you're getting to 6 to 8 mana, I mean, that's 3 to 4 cards a turn. And if they're not killing you, and the game's over real quick.
If your plan is to mill them and you have that much mana, you might just end up swinging over for the win if you're not flipping over lands.
Right, you don't have your hands tied just being based on a mill deck. Of course, it's a rare, too, so you won't be seeing this happen as much.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times Wizards, they kind of dangle the carrot in front of us and, say there's some mill cards here, and when you're drafting, you're like, oh, maybe I could go mill. That seems fun, but it never seems to turn into anything, at least for me. And I don't know if I've seen a whole lot of people, at least in limited, playing a mill deck. So hearing you talk about the fact that there is a mill deck in here somewhere, it'd be interesting to see if anyone gets any of it in their sealed pool on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other cards in blue, or do we want to move on?
Yeah, there's definitely a huge uncommon that needs to be thought about. Murder of Crows. It's air elemental, but when a creature dies, you loot.
I mean, this guy seems really powerful. Once again, he's an uncommon, so we won't see him as often. But when he's on the board, my goodness, you're just going to filter through your deck if your opponent is trying to get through.
Yeah, air elemental's been traditionally good enough on its own in limited. This guy's air elemental, except better. And blue sometimes is trading off creatures, trying to stay alive, and winning the game with flyers overhead. This gives you value off of every creature that you play as long as this guy is in play. You're going to be doing something, when you're trading off your creatures, you're going to be finding the spells that you need to finish putting away the game. That guy's just going to be a huge force. And again, huge flying creature, very difficult to beat.
While filling your graveyard still, we've been hitting over the head. Blue needs to do that. Almost 4 or 5 of the cards are requiring you to exile something from your yard.
What do you guys think about Stitcher's Apprentice?
I feel like it's another card that's going to help fuel all the other cards. It seems like a perfect 2-drop for blue. It's going to let you activate all of the creatures, whereas otherwise you may or may not be able to. It's going to be able to upgrade your small creatures when you're done with them, including actually being able to upgrade this guy to a 2/2 body if you need to. I don't see anything wrong with him. You probably almost always play him.
And I think segueing into our next color, that's where he's going to be best in blue-black when you're turning on your morbid cards. There's a lot of really powerful effects if you're morbid, and he's a perfect way to be doing that without using your removal way too easily.